You just got to notice that your rent is about to increase substantially. Here's what you do.
We've received a lot of questions recently from viewers about the rising cost of rent. Now, it just so happens that we discussed this topic with a couple of our grown sons,
when their rent increased twice in the past 18 months. A recent article on Yahoo Finance revealed that the average rent in the United States of America is just over $1,500 a month. Not only that, 50% of Americans who rent are finding it really difficult to keep up with the increases in rent. Now, we were quoted substantially in that article, so in case you want to read it in its entirety, I'm going to make sure that there's a link to the original article in the description of this video.
If you rent, tell us in the comments if your rent has gone up in the last couple of years and if you're struggling to meet that rent payment.
Here's part of the problem with rent. Rent is part of what we call the big three.
Yes, it is.
The big three are your housing, your food, and your transportation. Those three major components to any budget are what sort of sustain you.
Yeah.
It's your bare bones budget. And that's why an increase in rent can dramatically impact every other area of your budget.
Therefore, you must deal with it. It won't just go away or hide somewhere.
Before we give you our 4-step formula for dealing with increases in rent, in case you don't know us, I'm Hope.
And I'm Larry.
This is Under the Median, where every week we talk about practical frugality.
The first thing you need to know is your rights as a renter.
You want to look for that on your Attorney General website for your state. Generally, they will have that all spelled out, and oftentimes they'll have a PDF that's just a one-page checklist that you can print off. It will tell you not only what your rights are as a tenant, but what the responsibilities are of your landlord or landlady.
Step one is buy yourself some time. As soon as you find out that your rent is going to be increased substantially, then you need some time in order to make some adjustments in your budget.
Here's why that is so incredibly critical. Because if you don't create a plan, you are going to panic. Any of us, when we see those numbers in black and white, think, oh my Lord, what am I supposed to do? Your responsibility is to gain yourself time in order to readjust your budget. There are several different ways that you can do that. One way is to simply look in your bank account and say, do I have any additional money that is going to form a stopgap between now and when I know I want to have made a decision about whether I'm staying here and I'm going to pay the additional rent or whether I'm going to move on and find another place to live. You need to know about how much money you need to sustain that stopgap. And that amount of money, of course, is related to the number of months that you're giving yourself to readjust your budget. However, there's a caveat with this. You can't just look at the bottom line of your bank account balance and say, yep, that's how much money I have to sustain myself between now and making a decision about this rent. Not necessarily so. There are several different reasons why your bank account may be looking a little bit healthier than it actually is. And part of the reason for that is the fact that some of the money that is in your bank account is to go for future expenses. Yeah. Oftentimes we save up month over month in order to pay something that happens quarterly or semi-annually or annually. Health insurance is a great example of this, or life insurance. Even car insurance can be paid semi-annually or annually. If you are saving a little bit each month in order to pay that bill in full when it arrives, that amount of money may be in your bank account, but it's not spendable. So you need to take out all of those funds first before you look at what's left over and decide if you're just going to use part of that money in order to give yourself some time to make a decision. By the way, those funds are called sinking funds. And if you're unfamiliar with them or you've never used sinking funds, we did a step-by-step tutorial. We'll make sure, guys, it's linked up above, and we'll also put it in the description of this video.
If you have an emergency fund, you can, of course, use this in order to cover the extra rent payment that you're going to have. But you can't use the emergency fund forever and deplete it, because then you don't have an emergency fund. So if you use your emergency fund, make sure you're only doing it for a certain amount of time, maybe 2 or 3 months. And then after you're done using that, make sure you've reallocated your money in your budget so you're covering your rent and paying back your emergency fund from the money that you used from it.
Let's just say you've looked, you don't have any extra money in your bank account, and you don't have an emergency fund. What you need to do is to stop all discretionary spending.
Right.
That means eating out, dinner and movie out with friends, any social occasions that are going to cost you money, any classes that you take, anything that involves extra money going out. Pause that. Oftentimes when you'll pause that for just a few weeks, you will wind up with several $100s in your pocket in order to give yourself, once again, we are buying time.
If you're looking for ways to cut your own expenses, Hope wrote an ebook on it, and it's called 10 Ways to Radically Reduce Your Expenses. And this is free, and we'll leave a link for that in the description of this video.
If you're finding this video content helpful, do us a big favor, scroll up, give it a thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed to Under the Median, subscribe so you don't miss any of our great content.
Now you have money, you have your stopgap in place. The next thing you need to do is step 2, cut your expenses.
That extra rent money every month has to come from somewhere. It's not sustainable to fund it from your emergency fund forever, and it's not sustainable to take it from your savings forever. So you have to figure out, where is the money coming from? We suggest you start by looking for obvious places in your monthly expenses where you can cut back. Believe it or not, there are simple, easy ways which do not involve drilling holes in your landlord's property that you can cut your energy bills. For instance, anything that has standby power. These are items that have a remote control, or they have a clock. They're immediate on. When you want to use them, they're ready to go. They don't have to warm up. All of those items use something called
phantom power.
Or vampire power, which sounds even cooler. Believe it or not, it depends upon the number of items you have around your house which use this phantom power or vampire power. But you can cut your energy bills back by about 8% by simply unplugging these things when they are not in use.
Another thing you can do too is if you can cut down the size of the video screen that you're watching for your entertainment, you can save money that way. We had a video where somebody was actually cutting their TV usage all during the day, and they've even talked about switching from the TV to their laptop or even to their phone to look at videos, so they weren't using quite as large of a screen and not burning up as much energy.
You want an easy way to cut back on your energy bill during the summer? Use ceiling fans. Or even like the fans you can carry from room to room. What do you call it? Tabletop fans. Carry those from room to room. What happens is you are able to raise your AC temperature statistically by up to 4 degrees higher without any noticeable loss of comfort. Why? Because when you're sitting in a room, you've got a fan which is moving the air in the room around. And by the way, also statistically, for every degree that you will raise that AC, you will save between 1 and 3% on your upcoming utility bills.
If you need a couple more ideas, let's talk grocery prices. Hope has been excellent in cutting down how much we spend on groceries just by using generic labels, buying things that are on sale, buying things off season when they're going out and being cleared out of the store. There are so many ways that you can cut your grocery bill.
Simple things like don't go to the store hungry. Shop only the exterior aisles. It's those interior aisles where you find the prepackaged frozen foods. That's where you're going to spend a lot more money. And believe it or not, one of the tips that I give all the time that helped me to save about 20% on our grocery bills on average was simply to take 15, 20 minutes a week and menu plan based on items that I found on sale at the grocery store and also items that I'd already paid hard-earned money for and were sitting either in the freezer or they're sitting on the shelves of my pantry.
Also related to food and our eating habits is the use of going out to restaurants. Restaurants can cost us so much, and there's so many ways that you can do different things that will be as enjoyable as going to a restaurant. Maybe doing a potluck at a friend's house, maybe going outside for a picnic. That's eating out, after all. You're out, right? So there's different things you can do to replace your going to expensive restaurants.
Speaking of eating out, a lot of people have that habit of going out for the $10 lunch every day when they're at work. They go out with coworkers. About $10 is what you're going to spend eating out on any given day. We did the math. We allowed $4 of ingredients to make yourself a fantastic lunch to take lunch from home. And by doing that, if you eat out 5 days a week for lunch with your friends, $10 each time, you're going to cut that back by about $120 a month. And we are willing to bet that you can make yourself a very nice lunch each day for even less than $4 worth of ingredients. So consider taking your food from home when you go to work each day.
And just that tip alone will save you so much money that you can apply to your rent that might be going up.
Now, if you want even more ideas on how to cut back on some expenses and save money this summer, we just did a video that the example I just gave of the $120 a month on taking food from home to work instead of going out with coworkers. That was in that video. And we talked about ways that you can save $1,000 over the summer. We'll make sure, once again, guys, we'll link it up above, and we'll also put the video in the description of this video so you'll find it.
Step 3, and this might be kind of an obvious step to have to take, and that is if your expenses are going up and there's really no room there to make any major moves, then consider increasing your income. And there's so many different ways you can do that. You can simply ask for a raise. Maybe you'd like to get a promotion and apply for a more responsible job at your place that'll pay more. Maybe you can change your shift. If you're working first shift and you go to second, there might be a premium for working second. Usually, for sure, there's a premium for working third shift. So there is a lot of different ways that you can get your wages to go up.
Let your supervisor know that you are willing to take on extra shifts. This can involve working overtime. If you're working just part-time, this can involve picking up some extra shifts to get closer to full-time. This happens all the time. A lot of times they will post if there are extra shifts available. Our son has an after-school job, and there's always a listing every week of these shifts are available. And our son said that there's always a lady who is willing to take on that extra work.
You might also consider taking a second job. If you're working a first shift on your main employment, a second job you could work second shift on and just work some part-time to make some extra money.
I did that for quite a while. I worked 6 to 2, and then I went to a second job from about 3 to 6 o'clock each afternoon. Work a side gig. There are always things that you can do that other people are willing to pay you to do for them. If you're real handy, you can sell your handiwork on Etsy. Our daughter-in-law does this. She makes baskets, repurposed baskets out of grocery bags. They're beautiful baskets, and she sells them in her Etsy store. Freelance on Fiverr. Fiverr is a company that you basically list the skills that you have. A lot of people, business owners, will pay you to do some data entry, or they will pay you to do some remote work for them, and you can make some extra money doing that.
Another thing you can do is flip items. That would be an item that you bought, let's say at a garage sale for real cheap. Maybe it needed just a little bit of work, kind of to spruce it up a little bit. Well, take your time, fix it up real nice. You might be able to charge as much as 3 times what you paid for that item on Marketplace or eBay and sell it. And you can make some extra money by flipping items and reselling them.
Here's another idea: deliver food. This became really popular a few years ago. I will say in about 2020. This was a super popular thing to do. If you are going to do DoorDash or delivery of some kind, you have to take a few things into consideration. Check with your insurance company. Make sure that your insurance will still cover any accidents that would happen while you were driving on that route. Also, you want to make sure that you take into consideration there'll be extra gasoline costs and wear and tear on your car. Consider all of those things before taking that job, but a lot of times it's a great way to pick up a few extra dollars.
Step 4 is probably the most radical solution to the problem of rent being raised, and that is consider housing alternatives. That means you get out, you get on the internet, you go onto sites, and you look for a better place to stay that will cost you less money that you can afford.
One of the first things you want to do before you even start looking for a different apartment or a different home to rent you want to connect with your landlord or landlady. You want to make sure that you are looking at a copy of your lease.
Yes.
Find out how many months is left on that lease and what is the penalty for breaking that lease. Because if you're going to move to a place that costs less money, you want to make sure that you're saving more by moving than you are going to pay in fees and penalties for breaking the lease.
Right.
One of the things you also want to be aware of is make sure that you are looking for approximately the same square footage that you have now when you're comparing. You got to compare apples to apples, right? But you may want to consider looking for smaller or lesser square footage. Theoretically, not always across the board, but theoretically, if you have smaller square footage, you're also going to pay less rent. Now, it's not a direct comparison, but you want to make sure that you are actually putting out less money and you're still going to be able to comfortably live in the new space that you're considering renting.
Another thing you can do, and this I think you have to be a little careful with this day and age, but you might be able to find a roommate. Let's say you're single, maybe someone from your church or someone from your work, or maybe you just know a real good friend. You've known them a long time. You can trust them. If you can move in with a roommate, you can save a lot on your rent. Hope lived with two girls when she first moved out, and they were wonderful to live with. She had a great living arrangement. So they each paid 1/3 of the total cost of the rent, and that really helped.
I would say our two oldest boys, when they moved out, they shared an apartment together
Yes,
until
they did.
they each got married.
Right.
And so that was super helpful for them
Yes.
to move into an apartment together. Now, needless to say, know that person really, really well before you agree to move in with them. Make sure they have stable employment and they're going to be able to consistently pay their half of the rent. You need to check if you're going to stay where you're at. Check and make sure that your lease allows you to have someone else move in.
Yeah.
When our boys rented their apartment, their landlady told them right up front, it was a 2-bedroom apartment with a separate office space. And she said, this is zoned for 3 people to live in this apartment. If you ever decide to take in a roommate, you'll need to let me know ahead of time. Give me that person's name so that I can do a background check on them before they move in. But I need to know that you are sharing this space with someone besides you because it's your name on the lease.
Another thing you can do is set your search parameter a little wider than what you think you might need in terms of how far you're going to be from work and groceries and laundry or whatever else that you do. Just because, if you set your search parameter wider, you have more variety of places to look at.
And of course, the farther you get from town, you may pay a little bit less rent, but you have other things you have to take into consideration other than just the difference in rent.
That's right.
You're going to have higher gasoline costs. You're going to have to make sure that you do all of your errands while you're in town at work so that you're not running back and forth just to get, a gallon of milk or something like that, because it'll be just too far for you to continuously do that. There's also increased wear and tear on your car. So it's like a puzzle, right?
It is.
So for every piece you move, there are a couple other pieces you have to take into consideration because it's going to move those pieces around in your budget too. But we hope that altogether, everything that we're telling you is helpful in you making that decision about whether you stay put and pay the extra rent or move on and find another place to live.
Even if your rent isn't going up, you might be looking for some ways to save some quick cash. Hope and I did a video on this topic not too long ago on how to save $1,000 over the summer. And we went through a lot of different scenarios as to how you could actually put that in place. If you're interested in looking at that video, we'll put it right over there for you to click on.